Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to look at John chapter 6, verses 22 through 59. So there's a big chunk of text here. But before we look at this particular text, we need to look at the whole of John chapter 6. Sometimes John chapter 6 is called the bread of life discourse. It begins when Jesus feeds the 5,000 with the loaves and the fish, right? It's a very common story that a lot of people know. The rest of the chapter also talks about bread. It's kind of the conversation that happens after Jesus fed the crowd. Kind of people talking and processing and trying to figure out what this event means, that Jesus can feed these people like this. Well, in this particular part of the conversation, the people hear Jesus talk and he says, "I am the bread of life. I have come from heaven. I am more important than the manna that your ancestors got in the wilderness. You think that was bread from heaven? I am bread from heaven now for you." And the people listen to him and they think, "What? How can you say you're from heaven? We know your dad. We know Joseph. We know where you're from. How in the world can you say these things?" Right? This is sometimes how people respond to Jesus. They think they've got Jesus figured out. They think they know all there is to know about him. And when he says something new or different or surprising, they think, "Nope, I already know who you are. I'm not going to bother to learn anymore." Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we have our minds made up about Jesus, and we're not willing to let him open our minds. Well, Jesus is trying to open their minds here. He's trying to give them some good news, saying, "I have come for you. I am the new bread from heaven for you." They kind of look at him funny and say, "Okay, well then, what sign can you show us that we can believe you?" He just fed all those people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's not sign enough for you? Before we criticize them too much, think about our lives. How often do we want Jesus to perform some sign for us? "Give me a sign, Jesus," right? How many people say that? "Give me a sign. Show me that you're here. Show me that you're powerful and that you can do all these things. Basically, prove yourself to me. Why should I trust you? Show me what you can do." That's not faith. Jesus isn't some performing monkey here, right? Jesus is the one who calls us to have faith in him. Yes, Jesus acts in the world. This is very true. But he's not going to perform on cue, okay? When they ask for a sign, it's like, you just had a sign. Why do you want more? In our lives, Jesus has acted in so many ways, and yet sometimes we say, "Prove yourself. Show me what you got." And I can imagine Jesus kind of shaking his head and like, "What? Look at all the stuff I've already done. Is that not enough for you?" As this scene goes on, Jesus ends up talking about how he is the bread that comes down from heaven, as we saw earlier. But at the end of this scene, kind of around the 50s verses, Jesus talks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, which for many of us sounds like communion, right? And it should. But if you think about it, it sounds really, really gross, right? Eating flesh and drinking blood, who would want to do that? But think about this whole of John chapter 6 again. It started with Jesus feeding this crowd with this bread and this fish. And now he's saying, "I am the bread that came down from heaven. I am the bread of life. You eat my flesh, you drink my blood." Yes, there's a lot of imagery going on here, but the thing to notice about this chapter is it's not really about bread at all. It's about Jesus. Jesus feeds us with himself. Sometimes we get hung up on the bread. just like the people in this chapter did. But really, the emphasis is on Jesus. Think about Holy Communion again. Yes, there is bread and wine in Holy Communion, but it's not just bread and wine. It's not only bread and wine. It's also the body and blood of Christ. We celebrate Holy Communion because Jesus is present with us. In this meal, Jesus becomes as close to you as the food in your stomach, which is awesome, right? Jesus is the host, and he is the meal. This is what it's about, folks. Jesus is the one who feeds us with his very self. Jesus is the one who feeds you with his very self. That's what this bread of life discourse is about. Jesus is the bread of life. There's your 5-minute Bible study. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.